somewhere in the Pacific. I was on late watch, just me and the stars and the hiss of the bow cutting through the water. That's when I first saw it. A disturbance in the dark water off the port side. 2 large dippy dolphins, too deliberate for a random wave. Then a plume of mist shot up, illuminated briefly by the deck lights. A whale. Not unheard of, but this one was big, really big, and it was close. The next morning it was still there, keeping pace with us. A few of the other guys spotted him. Our bosun, a weathered old hand on the sea, squinted at it through his binoculars. "Humpback by the looks of it," he grunted. "Big fella. Lost his bod maybe." But there was something off about it. It wasn't just its size, though it was easily one of the largest I'd ever seen, rivaling the length of some of our smaller tendons. It was its back. It was a roadmap of scars, not just the usual nicks and scrapes you see from barnacles or minor tussles. These were huge, gouged out marks, some pale and old, and others more recent, an angry pink. Long tearing slashes and circular crater-like depressions. It looked like it had been through a war. And it was alone. Whales, especially humpbacks, are often social. This one was a solitary giant, a scarred sentinel in the vast empty ocean, and it was following us, not just swimming in the same general direction, but actively shadowing our ship. If we adjusted course, it adjusted too, maintaining its position a few hundred yards off our port side. This went on for the rest of the day. Some of the crew found it a novelty, a bit of wildlife to break the tedium. I just found it unsettling. There was an intelligence in the way it moved, in the occasional roll that brought a massive dark eye to the surface, seemingly looking right at us. The second day was the same. The whale was our constant companion. The novelty had worn off for most. Now it was just there, a silent, scarred presence. I spent a lot of my off hours watching it. There was a weird sort of gravity to it. I couldn't shake the feeling that its presence meant something, though I couldn't imagine what. The scars on its back fascinated and repulsed me. What could do something so immense? A propeller from a massive ship, an auger attack, but on a scale I'd never heard of. Then, late on the second day of its appearance, something else happened. Our ship started to lose speed. Not drastically at first, just a subtle change in the engine's rhythm, a slight decrease in the vibration underfoot. The chief engineer, a perpetually stressed man, was down in the engine room for hours. Word came up that there was some kind of issue with one of the propeller shafts, or maybe a fuel line clog. Nothing critical, they said, but we'd be running at a reduced speed for a while, at least until they could isolate the problem. That's when the whale's behavior changed. It was dusk. The ocean was turning that deep, bruised purple it gets before full night. I was leaning on the rail watching it. The ship was noticeably slower now, the wake less pronounced. Suddenly, the whale surged forward, closing the distance between us with alarming speed. It dove, then resurfaced right beside the hull, maybe 20 yards out, and then it hit us. shout. The whale surfaced again, its scarred black back glistening, and then, with a deliberate, powerful thrust of its tail, it slammed its massive body into our hull again. This time alarms started blaring. "What in the hell?" someone yelled from the deck below. The captain was on the wing of the bridge, her voice cutting through the sudden chaos. "All hands report." What was that? The whale hit us a third time. This wasn't a curious nudge. This was an attack. It was ramming us. The impacts were heavy enough to make you think it could actually breach the hull if it hit a weak spot. Panic started to set in. A creature that size, actively hostile. We were a steel ship, sure, but the ocean is a big place and out here, you're very much on your own. A few of the guys, deckhands mostly, grabbed gaff hooks and whatever heavy tools they could find, rushing to the side, yelling, trying to scare it off. The bosun appeared with a flare gun, firing a bright red star over its head. The whale just ignored it, preparing for another run. "Get the rifles," someone shouted. I think it was the second mate. "We need to drive it off." I felt a cold knot in my stomach. Shooting it, a whale. It felt monstrously wrong, but it was also ramming a multi-ton steel vessel, and that was just insane. It could cripple us, or worse, damage itself fatally on a hull. Before anyone could get a clear shot, as a group of crew members gathered, rifles on the deck, the whale suddenly dove deep. It vanished into the darkening water as if it had never been there. The immediate assumption was that the show of force, the men lining the rail, had scared it off. We waited, tense, for a long 5 minutes. Nothing. The ship continued its slow, laborious crawl through the water. The captain ordered damage assessments. Miraculously, apart from some scraped paint and a few dented plates above the waterline, our ship seemed okay. But the mood was grim. What if it came back? Why would a whale do that? Rabies? Some weird sickness? "It's the slow down," the veteran sailor said, his voice low as he stood beside me later, staring out at the black water. "Animals can sense weakness. Ship's wounded, moving slow. Maybe it thinks we're easy prey or dying." "Prey?" I asked. "It's a baleen whale, isn't it? It eats krill." The veteran sailor just shrugged, his weathered face unreadable in the dim lights of the deck. "Nature's a strange thing, kid. Out here, anything's possible." The engine problems persisted. We were making maybe half of our usual speed. Every creak of the ship, every unusual slap of a wave against the hull had us jumping. The whale didn't reappear for the rest of the night, or so we thought. My watch came around again in the dead of night, the hours between 2 and 4 a.m. The deck was mostly deserted. The sea was calm, black glass under a stardusted sky. I was trying to stay alert, scanning the water, my nerves still frayed, and then I saw it. A faint ripple, then the gleam of a wet back, much closer this time. It was the whale. It had returned, but only when the deck was quiet, when I was, for all intents and purposes, alone. My heart hammered. I reached for my radio, ready to call it in, but then it did something that made me pause. It didn't charge, it just swam parallel to us, very close, its massive body a dark shadow in the water. It let out a long, low moan, call it in. I just watched. This wasn't the aggressive creature from before. This was something else. It continued this for nearly an hour. The moment I saw another crew member, a sleepy-looking engineer on his way to the galley, emerge onto the deck, further afoot, the whale sank slightly beneath the waves and was gone. It was as if it only wanted me to see it, to witness this bizarre, bleeding behaviour. The next day the engineers were still wrestling with the engines. We were still slow, and the whale kept up its strange pattern. During the day, if the crowd was on the deck, it stayed away, or if it did approach and men rushed to the rails with shouts or weapons, it would dive and disappear. But if I was alone on deck, or if it was just me and maybe one other person who wasn't paying attention to the water, it would come close. It would start the bumping. Not hard, not damaging, but persistent. It was eerie. It felt like it was trying to communicate something. The other crew were mostly convinced it was mad, or that the ship's vibrations, altered by the engine trouble, were agitating it. The talk of shooting it became more serious. The captain was hesitant. Thankfully, internal maritime laws about protected species, but also I think a sailor's reluctance to harm such a creature unless absolutely necessary. Still, rifles were kept ready. I started to feel a strange connection to it. Those scars, the mournful sound it made when it was just me. It didn't feel like aggression. It felt like a warning, or a plea, but for what? I'd stare at its scarred back and wonder again what could inflict such wounds. The gashes looked like they were made by something with immense claws, or teeth that weren't like a shark's. The circular marks were even weirder, almost like suction cups, but grotesquely large and with torn edges. The morning had all ended. I was on the dawn watch. The sky was just beginning to lighten in the east, a pale grey smear. The sea was flat, oily. We were still crawling. The whale was there, off the port side as usual. It had been quiet for the last few hours, just keeping pace. I felt a profound weariness. 3 days of this. 3 days of the ship being crippled. 3 days of this scarred giant shadowing us. Its intentions a terrifying enigma. I remember sipping lukewarm coffee, staring out at the horizon when I saw the whale react. It suddenly arched its back, its massive tail lifting high out of the water before it brought it down with a tremendous slap. The sound cracked across the quiet morning like a gunshot. Then it dove, a panicked, desperate dive, not the slow, deliberate submergence I was used to. It went straight down, leaving a swirling vortex on the surface. "What the hell now?" I muttered. My eyes scanned the water where it had disappeared, and then I saw it, further back, maybe a half-mile behind us. Something else was on the surface. At first it was just a disturbance, a dark shape in the grey water, but it was moving fast, incredibly fast, closing the distance to where the whale had been. It wasn't a ship, and it wasn't any whale I'd ever seen. As it got closer, still mostly submerged, I could see its back. It was long, dark, and glistening, but it wasn't smooth like a whale's. It had ridges and things sticking out of it, 2 of them on either side of its spine, arching up and then back. They weren't fins, not like a shark's dorsal fin, whale's flippers. They looked like wings, leathery, membranous wings, like a bat's, but colossal, and with no feathers, just bare dark flesh stretched over a bony framework. They weren't flapping, they were held semi-furled against its back, cutting through the water like grotesque sails. The thing was slicing through the ocean at a speed that made our struggling cargo ship look stationary. A cold dread, so absolute it was almost paralyzing, seized me. This was what the whale was running from. This was the source of its scars. The winged thing reached the spot where our whale had dived. It didn't slow. It just tilted and slipped beneath the surface without a splash, as if the ocean were a veil it simply passed through. For a minute, nothing. The sea was calm again, deceptively so. I was shaking, my coffee cup clattering against the saucer I'd left on the railing. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. Flesh wings in the ocean. Then the water began to change colour. Slowly at first, then with horrifying speed, a bloom of red spread outwards from the spot where they'd both gone down. A slick, dark, crimson stain on the grey morning sea. It grew wider and wider. The whale, our whale. I felt sick, a profound sense of horror and strangely loss. That scar giant with its mournful cries and strange bumping pleas. It hadn't been trying to hurt us. It had been terrified. It had been trying to get our attention, trying to warn us, maybe even seeking refuge with the only other large thing in that empty stretch of ocean, our ship. And when we slowed down, when we became vulnerable, it must have known we were drawing its hunter closer, or maybe it was trying to get us to move faster, to escape. The slamming, it was desperate. The blood slick was fast now, a hideous smear on the calm water. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. My crewmates were starting to stir, a few coming out on deck, drawn by the dawn. I heard someone ask, "What's that? Oil spill?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. I was still staring at the bloody water, a good quarter-mile astern now as we slowly pulled away. And then something broke the surface in the middle of it. It rose slowly, terribly. It wasn't the whale. First, a section of that rigid, dark back. Then those hideous, furled wings of flesh. And then its head, or what passed for a head. There were no eyes that I could see, no discernible features, really, except for what was clearly its mouth. It was a hole, a vast circular maw, big enough to swallow a small car, and it was lined, packed with rows upon rows of needle-sharp, glistening teeth, some as long as my arm. They weren't arranged like a shark's in neat rows. They were a chaotic forest of ivory daggers pointing inwards. The flesh around this nightmare orifice was pale and rubbery, like something that had never seen the sun. It just was. A vertical abyss of teeth hovering above the blood-stained water. It wasn't looking at the ship, not in a general sense. It was higher out of the water than I would have thought possible for something of that bulk without any visible means of buoyancy, beyond the slight unfurling of those terrible wings, which seemed to tread water with a slow, obscene power. It rotated slowly, and then it stopped, and I knew with a certainty that froze the marrow in my bones that it was looking at me. possessed by a butcher, a focused, chilling attention right on me, standing there on the deck of our vessel. Time seemed to stop. The sounds of the ship, the distant chatter of the waking crew faded away. It was just me and that thing, staring at each other across a widening expanse of bloody water. I could feel my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. I couldn't breathe. Then the chief engineer came up beside me, the same one who'd been battling our engine troubles. "God Almighty," he whispered, his face pale. "What in the name of all that's holy is that?" The spell broke. The thing didn't react to the chief. Its focus, if that's what it was, remained on me for another second or two. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, it began to sink back beneath the waves, its toothed maw the last thing to disappear into the red. The captain was on the bridge wing, binoculars pressed to her eyes, her face a mask of disbelief and horror. Orders were shouted. "Full power! Get us out of here! Whatever you have to do, Chief, give me everything you've got." Suddenly the engine problem that had plagued us for days seemed less important, miraculously, or perhaps spared by the sheer terror of what we'd just witnessed. The engines spared to life. The ship shuddering as it picked up speed faster than it moved in days. No one spoke for a long time. We just stared at that bloody patch of water, shrinking in our wake. The silence was heavier than any storm. The realization hit me fully then, like a physical blow. The wail, the scars, the way it only approached when I was alone, bumping the hull, moaning. It wasn't trying to hurt us. It was running. It was terrified. It was trying to tell us, trying to warn us. Maybe even thought our large metal ship could offer some protection, or that we could help it. When we slowed down, we became a liability, a slow-moving target that might attract its pursuer. Its frantic slamming against the hull. When the ship first slowed, it was trying to get us to move, to escape the fate it knew was coming for it. And it had singled me out for some reason. Maybe I was just the one on watch most often when it was desperate. Maybe it sensed. I don't know. I don't want to know. The rest of the voyage was a blur of hushed conversations, wide eyes and constant fearful glances at the ocean. We reported an unidentified aggressive marine phenomenon and the loss of a whale, but how do we even begin to describe what we saw? Who would believe it? The official log was sanitized. We made it to port. I signed off the ship as soon as we docked. I haven't been back to sea since. I don't think I ever can. I feel so sad for the poor whale. That was good. I just wish there was more of the actual creature. We didn't get to see it do anything really other than come in at the end. Okay, this next story is titled, let's move that. The most important rule at my job is to never create a physical record. I found what the last person in my position wrote, and I think I'm in danger. It started 6 months ago. I was fresh out of grad school with a master's in history, a mountain of debt that gave me nightly anxiety attacks, and a resume that was getting ignored by every museum and every university in a 3-state radius. I was applying for everything: retail, data entry, barista. I was about 2 weeks from having to crawl associate. The foundation, discretion, precision, and an exceptional capacity for recall are paramount. No formal experience required. Generous compensation. Generous was an understatement. The salary they listed was more than my parents made combined. I figured it was a typo or a scam, but I was desperate, so I polished my CV and sent it in, not expecting to hear back. They called me the next day. The woman on the phone had a smooth voice, but with a weight to it. She didn't ask about my experience or my degree. She asked me a series of bizarre questions. When you were 10, what was the pattern on the wallpaper in your grandmother's kitchen? Describe the cover of the third book you see when you picture your childhood bookshelf. What was the name of the street sign you passed just before turning onto your current road this morning? Luckily for me, my brain is just sticky. Details cling to it, and I know for a fact that it's a photogenic, sensory thing. I can close my eyes and walk through my grandmother's house, feel the cool linoleum under my feet, smell the potpourri she kept in a bowl on the sideboard. I answered her questions and she said, "Please be at this address tomorrow at 9 a.m. sharp, dress for an interview." The address was a downtown monolith, a skyscraper with no name on the facade, just an elaborate interlocking symbol above the heavy bronze doors that looked like a stylized knot. The lobby was a cavern of marble and silence. The air was cool and still, like a cathedral. A man in a simple, perfectly tailored grey suit met me and led me to an elevator, then up to a floor that had no button. He used a key. The interview was with a man I now know only as the supervisor. He was ageless, with pale eyes that seemed to look right through me. He explained the job. It was simple, he said. Deceptively so. Each day I would be given a single photograph. My task was to study that photograph from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. I was to absorb it, to commit every single detail to memory, the play of light, the grain of the image, the expressions on the faces, the stitching on a coat, the cracks in a sidewalk, the reflection in a window. "You will become the living record," he said, his voice a low hum. "You will not write anything down. You will not make any copies. You will not discuss your work with anyone. At 5 o'clock, I will collect the photograph and you will watch me incinerate it. The Foundation's motto is Quaedam Optime Memorandum. Some things are best remembered." It was the strangest job I'd ever heard of, but the debt was on my chest, and the number on the contract he slid across the mahogany desk could change my entire life. I sighed. My workspace was in a vast circular room that felt like a panopticon. Dozens of identical wooden corrals were arranged in concentric rings, all facing a central pillar. Each corral was a small three-sided booth with a comfortable chair, a desk, and a single lamp. There were maybe 30 other people in the room, but the only sound was the soft rustle of clothing and the low, ever-present hum of the building's climate control. No one spoke. No one even looked at each other. They were all just like me, head down, focused with an intensity that was almost unnerving. They had the same look I saw in the mirror every morning, stream through a grimy arched window, illuminating a universe of dancing dust motes. That was it. For 8 hours I just looked. I memorized the way the shadows fell, the specific pattern of the water stains on the far wall, the number of crystal pendants missing from the chandelier, 17. At 5 p.m. the supervisor came, took the photo with a pair of tongs, and I followed him to a small, soundproofed room containing a sleek, modern furnace. He unlocked it, slid the photo inside, and pressed a button. A soft whir, a flash of orange light, and it was gone. He nodded at me, and I went home. The days fell into a rhythm, a new photo every morning. A wedding party from the 1920s, the bride smile just a little too tight. A grimy factory floor, many flat caps staring grimly at a piece of machinery. A desolate stretch of highway at dusk, a single abandoned car with its door hanging open. A crowded market in a city I couldn't place, faces blurred with motion except for one small child, staring directly at the camera, their expression utterly blank. They were all unlabeled, no dates, no locations, no context, just moments, frozen and silent. My colleagues remained phantoms. We'd nod sometimes, in the elevator or the sterile break room where we'd microwave our sad, solitary lunches. But we never spoke. It was a rule, and a powerful one. It was as if we were all part of some silent, monastic order. I saw a woman who couldn't have been older than me, but her eyes had the haunted, distant look of a war veteran. An older man always rubbed his left temple, a constant rhythmic motion as he stared at his photos. We were all islands. The dream started about a month in. At first they were just echoes. I dreamed I was standing in the dusty ballroom, and I could smell the decay and dry rot. I'd hear the faint ghostly echo of a waltz. I woke up feeling unsettled, but dismissed it. My job was to stare at images all day. Of course they'd creep into my subconscious. But they got stronger. After a week spent memorizing a photo of a grim-faced family on a sagging porch in what looked like the Dust Bowl, I had a dream where I was the father. I could feel the rough, splintered wood of the porch railing under my hand, the grit of the dust between my teeth, the gnawing, hopeless hunger in my stomach. I felt desperate, a protective love for the woman and children beside me, a love so fierce and painful it made my chest ache when I woke up. The day I studied a photo of a collapsed mine entrance, I spent the night dreaming of darkness, the oppressive weight of the earth above me, the taste of coal dust, the chilling subterranean cold that seeps into your bones. I heard the shouts of other men, muffled and terrified, and the groan of shifting rock. I woke up gasping for air, my pajamas soaked in sweat, my throat raw from screams that had been trapped in my sleeping mind. This became the new normal. Every night I was a tourist in someone else's tragedy. I was a soldier in a trench, the mud soaking at my boots, the smell of cordite and fear thick in the air. I was a lone woman in a lighthouse, the storm winds howling around me like a hungry beast, the waves crashing against the stone with the force of cannonballs. I was a witness to a car accident, fires, arguments, steeped in a quiet, venomous rage. I was living 100 different lives and none of them were my own. My own life began to feel thin and unreal. I'd be walking to the grocery store and the texture of the modern pavement would feel strange, alien. The bright colours of the cereal aisle seemed garish and loud compared to the sepia and black and white worlds I inhabited every night. My own memory started to get fuzzy. I had to really concentrate to remember my college roommate's name, but I could tell you the exact pattern of the rust stains on the hull of a shipwreck I'd studied for 8 hours 3 weeks prior. The first major crack appeared on a Tuesday. I had spent the day with a particularly haunting photograph. It was a street corner, sometime in the late 70s, judging by the cars and clothes. A crowd was gathered, looking at something just out of frame. Their faces were a mixture of shock and morbid curiosity. But my focus, for 8 hours, had been on one man at the edge of the crowd. He was younger, maybe in his early 20s, with a thick mustache and a denim jacket. He wasn't looking at whatever the main event was. He was looking away, his face pale, his eyes wide with a specific personal terror. He was the only one who looked truly afraid. That evening, on my way home, I saw him. I was waiting to cross the street, and he was on the other side. Older, of course. His mustache was grey, his face lined with intervening 40-odd years. But it was him, the same wide-set eyes, the same shape of his jaw. The denim jacket was gone, replaced by a rumpled tweed coat, but it was unmistakably the man from the photograph. I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs. It had to be a coincidence, a trick of the light. My overstimulated brain making connections that weren't there. But then he turned his head, and his eyes met mine across the 4 lanes of traffic. Recognition dawned on his face, and then horror. The exact same expression from the photograph. A raw, gut-wrenching terror that seemed to suck all the air out of the space between us. He looked at me as if I were a ghost, as if I were the very thing he'd been running from on that street corner all those years ago. He stumbled backwards, turned, and practically ran, disappearing into the evening crowd. I stood there for a long time, the traffic lights cycling from red to green to red again, the world moving on around me while my own had just ground to a sickening halt. That was when the paranoia began in earnest. The silence of the archive, once peaceful, now felt predatory. The hyper-focus of my colleagues no longer seemed like professional dedication. It looked like a desperate attempt to keep something at bay. I started watching them more closely. The man who rubbed his temples, his hand would sometimes twitch, his fingers playing as if trying to ward something off. The young woman's haunted eyes would occasionally flick towards an empty space in her corral, her breath catching for a second before she forced her gaze back to the photo. I had to know what was going on. I broke the cardinal rule. I waited for the temple-rubbing man in the break room. He was nuking a container of what looked like plain rice. I walked up to him, my heart thudding. "Excuse me," I said, my voice sounding rusty and loud in the quiet room. He flinched. He didn't even turn. He didn't just turn. He physically recoiled, his back hitting the counter. He looked at me with wide, panicked eyes, shaking his head frantically. He grabbed his rice, the microwave beeping insistently, and almost ran from the room, never once making eye contact. He didn't say a single word. The message was clear. We don't talk. We can't talk. Maybe we're not allowed to talk, or maybe we're just too afraid of what might happen if we do. Then people started to disappear. One Monday, the corral to my left was empty. The man who sat there, a quiet fellow with thinning hair, was just gone. No one mentioned it. His desk was cleared out, as if he'd never existed. 2 weeks later, the woman with the haunted eyes was gone too. Her corral was also wiped clean. was a small, folded piece of paper. My blood ran cold. It felt deliberate, clandestine. I waited until my hands stopped shaking, then slipped it into my pocket. I spent the day in a fugue state, staring at a photo of a single, withered black rose lying on a cobblestone street, my mind entirely on the note in my pocket. That night, in the privacy of my apartment, I unfolded it. It wasn't a note, not in the traditional sense. It was just a string of alphanumeric characters. A7B3-C9D1-E4F8. I had no idea what it meant. A code, a web address. Then I remembered. Every archivist had a small personal safe in the locker room for valuables. We set our own combinations, but this didn't look like a combination. It looked like a serial number, or a key. The next day I watched The Woman with the Haunted Eyes grow. It was still empty. I took a chance. After everyone had left, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I went to the locker room. I found a locker. Next to the combination dial was a small, almost invisible keyhole. It was an override. This had to be it. I looked for a key, but then it clicked. The sequence was a password for the digital lock on her safe. I typed in the sequence. There was a soft beep and a heavy click. The safe was full with paper, scraps, notebooks, loose leaf sheets filled with a frantic, spidery handwriting. It was forbidden knowledge. The one thing we were never ever supposed to do. She had been writing it all down. I took it all, stuffed it in my bag, and ran. I've spent the last 3 days poring over her notes. It's not a single coherent narrative. It's the fragmented, desperate research of a brilliant, terrified mind. There are clippings from obscure historical journals, printouts from physics forums, and pages of her own synthesis. And I finally understand. According to her notes, certain moments in time, certain places, are so saturated in trauma or violence, or some powerful, paradoxical emotion, that they create a kind of scar on reality, a resonance. She used a lot of terms I barely understood: quantum entanglement, temporal feedback loops, mnemonic resonance. But the term she kept circling, the one she'd scrolled over and over in the margins, was genius loci, spirit of place, but she'd added her own qualifier: genius loci malignum. These aren't just memories of bad events, they are events themselves, still echoing. They are moments that have become sentient, predatory. A mirror that was so brutal it imprinted itself on the room, and now the room itself lashes out at anyone who enters. A paradox, like a man who appears in a photograph of his own grandfather's unit years before he was born, creating a loop that attracts things, unwanted attention from outside. These are glitches in the fabric of the universe, hauntings of a moment, of a place, of an idea. The Foundation's job is to find these glitches. They capture them, and the way they capture a rogue moment, a sentient memory, is to take a photograph. The photograph acts as a physical anchor, a key, but it's unstable. The note explained the process. Step 1. The photograph isolates the entity. It traps the genius loci in a single static image. Step 2. The archivist, through intense, prolonged focus, transfers the anchor from the photograph into their own consciousness. Our photographic memories, our ability to absorb every single detail, it the original physical anchor, leaving the entity trapped entirely within the mind of the archivist. It has nowhere else to go. We are prisons, human prisons for things that should not exist. The motto, "Some things are best remembered," is a cruel, literal joke. They are remembered by us, and only us, so that the rest of the world can forget, so that its malevolent echoes can't bleed out and harm anyone else. The few suffer for the many. The woman's journal entries chronicled her decline. October 12th, archived the boardwalk collapse. I can still hear the screams when it's quiet. Sometimes I smell salt water and the fried dough. November 4th, saw the arsonist from the warehouse fire photo on the subway today. He looked right at me and smiled. It wasn't a human smile. December 19th, my sister came to visit. For a second her face wasn't her face. It was the face of the porcelain doll from that abandoned nursery photo. I screamed. She thinks that I'm having a breakdown. January 8th. I've archived 112 anomalies. There isn't much room left for me in here. I can't remember what I had for breakfast, but I know the exact number of buttons on the coat of a man who vanished from a ship in 1924. Her last entry was short. They're getting out. They're leaking. The cage is full. I've archived almost 200 of them now. 200 of these things, and the cage is full. My cage is full. My reality is fraying at the seams. Last night I was making tea, and for a full minute my kitchen wasn't my kitchen. It was a cold, tiled morgue from a photo I'd studied months ago. The man from the 70th Street corner. I see him everywhere now, in crowds. His face always twisted in that same silent scream. Always looking right at me. The walls of my apartment sometimes ripple and show me the peeling wallpaper of a Victorian seance room. The static on the radio whispers words in a language I don't know but understand with a cold dread. I think now that I am a walking, talking containment unit that is breached, and the entities I hold are starting to leak into the world around me. The other day, my landlord knocked on my door to ask about a water leak, and he flinched when he saw me. He said, "Sorry, for a second there, you look like someone else. A lot of someone else's." He left without another word, his face pale. I found myself in my bathroom 2 nights ago, holding a bottle of pills. It felt like the most logical, rational thought I'd had in months. If I ended, they end with me. The memories, the things wearing the skins of memories, they all get erased. It would be a release, for me and for the world. But as I was about to do it, the supervisor's voice echoed in my head. "You will become the living record." And I realized with a sudden freezing certainty that this is what they want. This is the end of the job cycle. It's the Foundation's retirement plan. They hire us, fill us up with these horrors until we break, and then we retire ourselves. It's clean, efficient, and it completes the final incineration. So now I'm trapped. I can't go on like this. I'm losing myself. My own memories feel like old, faded photographs compared to the vivid, high-definition nightmares I'm forced to carry. But I can't kill myself, because that's playing their game. That's letting them win. That's doing their dirty work for them. Is there another way? Can you fight a memory? Can you exercise an event? I'm sitting in my apartment right now. The lights are flickering. In the reflection of the dark screen, my face is a